God is waiting for us to give up control. Hello, my friends. My last video I talked about we have to give it all up to get it all, right? God is waiting. God simply wants our undivided attention, surrender. And to give it all up, to get it all, we have to give it all up. Our thoughts, our cares, worries, fears, desires, attachments, including one of the hardest things to give up, control. Let's talk about where control comes from, how it is created, right? How control is created and how we give it all up and what's actually happening. Let's talk about why there is no control and why it is an illusion. I've made many videos on the burden of control, the illusion of choice and control. What's another one? It's such an important topic because it's the hardest thing to give up. Our ego holds on so tightly to thinking we are in control. And the thinking we're in control is the cause of a lot of our issues. It's one of our greatest attachments, and it causes many imbalances because thinking we're in control, right? It gets us attached to outcomes and expectations. It causes stress because we think we're in control. We think we're sinners. We have regret and shame and guilt, all these things, and judgment. All these things assume control, which we'll talk about. So first, let's talk about where does control come from? How does the thought of us being in control, how is it created? Well, let's start out with the circle, right? Stay in the center of the circle and allow all things to take their course. The center of the circle is our wholeness, right? Our wholeness with the divine, with God. This is the thoughtless, detached state. This, we are the observer. We're God observing itself. We have no attachments. We are one with it all. So where does control come from? When do we begin to think we're in control? Well, we are born into a sea of stimulation, aggravation, and information, right? And what happens is this stimulation, aggravation, information perpetuates the cycles of thought. It gets the mind going. It starts the cycles of thought, which takes us from the whole and creates separation and drags us, once we get caught in the cycles of thought, it drags us into the illusion. Then we start to our thoughts start to identify with our ego and our somebodyness. We begin to think we're somebody. We begin to think we're somebody doing something. We begin to think we know, which causes a whole another set of issues. We begin to think we're in control, which all these attachments keep us in lower limiting perspectives in the illusion, right? Because in this separation, because we're not in the whole. So we think we're in control, right? So this is where control comes from. But what happens when we stop thinking? When we're in the center of the circle, there is no control. That's why control is an illusion. It only exists in the thinking mind and is created by all this aggravation, stimulation, and information. That's why to eventually become the observer, we need to practice presence and purification, right? Presence, we need to stay in the center of the circle and just observe. When we do this, when we become the observer and stop thinking, there goes control. You think you're in control. What happens when you stop thinking? No control, because control only exists when we think. Why do we get stressed? Because we think we're in control, right? We have judgment, and we have shame, guilt, regret, and judgment. All these things assume control. Sin all assumes control. But what if there is no control? That's a lower limiting perspective. What happens when we stop thinking and we just observe, right? There's no control. There goes control. That's surrender. God is waiting for us to completely surrender, which is what? Completely giving up control. That's what God's waiting for. But how do we do this? Why is it judgment is silly, right? When we judge other people, we're really judging a program. So when we're the observer and we're observing, what do we start to observe? When we're not thinking and we give up control. And we don't know, right? We go from being caught in the illusion, thinking we're somebody doing something, thinking we're in control, thinking we know, to not knowing anything. I don't know. I am the observer. I'm detached. I'm thoughtless. I am simply God observing itself. I am in the center of the circle, right? I am detached from the ego. I am whole. Separation, whole, right? So when we become the observer and stop thinking long enough, the thing is, so many people, their entire lives is thinking, so they don't know what it is to not think, and to not think long enough to be the observer, long enough to realize we are just nature running off. We are just karma running off. We are just chemistry and conditioning. So we are born into a world of sea of stimulation, aggravation, information, right? And we are programmed to eat certain foods that do what? That affect our chemistries in certain ways. Acidic, aggravating foods that will make us act certain ways, right? They're going to aggravate our being, our mind, our emotions, all these things, because that's the program we were born into. And then how do we deal with this chemistry? But whatever conditioning they give us to deal with it. And a lot of times they give us negative conditioning to deal with the chemistry. It's all just nature running off. There is no control. You can only ever make one choice based off your chemistry and conditioning. And eventually, we get stuck in these hardened lower perspectives. Eventually, a trauma sometimes will cause us to break a hole in this perspective and let in a little bit of light, and then we start to see a little bit of truth maybe, and we start to realize presence and purification. This is what happened to me. I reached a low point. I reached so much trauma that it broke a hole in my hardened perspective of my ego, of my somebodyness, thinking I was in control, thinking I know, and God gave me, our cosmic beloved gave me meditation, which changed my life, because that started as I began to meditate and stop my thoughts and calm my mind and facilitate a state of peace and purify the body. And eventually this led me to reconstitute or empty the mind. As I started to do all these things, you slowly dissolving the ego. And as we dissolve the ego, we move closer and closer to the center of the circle. And the more we stay present and purify the body and dissolve the ego, we start to become the observer, and we realize there's no control. You only think you're in control. But what happens when we stop thinking and become the observer? You realize we're just nature running off. People are just their chemistry and their conditioning. They're just nature running off ever. And what happens is sometimes we receive new conditioning. And that new conditioning will have us changing our chemistry. And when our chemistry changes, we'll act different, right? And and when we dissolve our ego and we open up our consciousness, we're more apt to take in different new conditioning. Conditioning is not a positive and negative. It could be, it could be anything. It's not positive or negative. I guess you could, on the earth level, you could say yes. All right. On the ego level, there's positive and negative, right? We could say there's positive and negative conditioning. It can go either way, right? You just receive different conditioning. Just like there is no bad habits, right? They're just merely things we do to cope with being out of balance, all of which this is a part of. That's why it's so important we have to give up control, because that's going to help us maintain balance. And judgment is such a funny thing, because we're really just a program judging a program. What are we judging? You're judging someone's, and once you become the observer enough, right, and you become present, you give up thought, or you try at least, and you become the observer and observe nature running off, you realize there is no judgment, really. It's a trap, because you're observing someone's chemistry and conditioning. They're not even in control. They're just acting based off their chemistry and conditioning. This is why there's no shame, guilt, regret, sin. All these things assume control. They're all just traps. They're all just mental traps when we think we're in control. And the same thing goes when you're judging other people for doing these things. They're not in control. They're just based. You can only ever make one decision. There's never this or that. There's only what happens, because whatever happens was always going to happen because it happens based off of your chemistry and conditioning. You're just nature running off. The thing is, when we start thinking in the cycles of thought, that sea of stimulation, aggravation, information gets us thinking, gets us identifying with our somebody. So we think we're somebody doing something. We think somebody else is somebody doing something. We think we have control. We think they have control. We think we know, right? So we can't take in higher perspectives. There's always a higher perspective. That's the perspective of God. The perspective of God doesn't know. The perspective of God has no control. The perspective of God is eternal, unconditional love unto everything and everyone. Why do I always say at the end of my videos, I am God's eternal love pouring forth? Because that is the embodiment of complete surrender. Because when we surrender completely, give up control, give up thought, give up our somebodyness, give up thinking we know, we become a vessel for God to work through us completely and utterly, God's eternal, unconditional love. So that pretty much sums up what I wanted to talk about today. Why there is no control. What's really going on? It's just nature running off. We just get caught in the cycles of thought and we think we're in control. So how do we give up control? How do we surrender? Presence and purification. Constantly focusing on staying present, because that is the greatest devotion to God. Presence and purification are the greatest devotions to God. And these will solve all of our problems. These will bring us into balance if we're out of balance. These will cause all things that do not serve us to be released from us, right? These will naturally release these things, presence and purification, facilitating a state of peace, removing the aggravators. Why do I constantly repeat the same things over and over? Because we're talking about the greatest thing in the illusion, which is breaking free from the illusion and becoming an infinite vessel for the cosmic beloved, which is the highest attainment of this illusion. And eventually breaking completely free from all of our biases and hardened perspectives and attachments that keep us in lower limiting perspectives, and getting completely into the center of the circle, which is what? Cosmic consciousness. This is when we are always present and we have given it all up. Given up control, given up our thoughts, our somebodyness, given up everything, thinking we know. And we are purely the observer. Then we are purely observing nature running off. That's when we really realize there is no control. What are these gurus we learn about, and a lot of these spiritual texts and these yogis that have reached cosmic consciousness? They have given it all up, right? And that is how we escape the cycles of rebirth. We have to give it all up. So that's our main focus ever. Remember, there's nothing really to do, nothing else to do in this life besides presence and purification, working on giving it all up. Why not just presence? Sure, you could. It makes it a little harder. Purification aids presence. They work together. Just like I add in facilitating a state of peace. Everything is about helping us stay present. Everything's about helping us, pulling our attention from all these nonsense that the illusions throws at us to suck away our attention, so we can give our attention back to our cosmic beloved, which will allow the divine to work through us. Emptying the mind, so important to reconstitute the mind, because God is waiting for us to give it all up, including seeking information and trying to do anything. We don't have to try to do anything, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I am so glad to share a moment with you, my beautiful friends. This journey of spiritual awakening can be very difficult. I know it was extremely difficult for me in my first many years, and it still continues to have its difficulties. Even as we start to make more progress and we start to receive more divine, deeper understandings, we still have a lot to work out, lifetime worth of things to work out, a lifetime worth of balance, a lifetime worth of emptying the mind and giving up control. Even though we start to understand these things, it doesn't mean we can instantly completely do it, right? That's why I make these videos repeating the same thing over and over again, because I know I need to keep hearing it, and I'm just going to keep on going as long as I know I need to keep hearing it, which is always, I know you, my friends, also need to keep hearing the spiritual repetition, because the illusion's going to keep on pulling as hard as it can. And I know the illusion will never stop trying to destroy and seek our consciousness and our attention. So I will never stop reminding you, my beautiful brothers and sisters, to bring it all back to presence and purification, the two greatest devotions to God. And I will never stop reminding myself and you, my friends, stay in the center of the circle and allow all things to take their course. Be the observer. Just allow nature to run off no matter what you're watching, right? And remind yourself, I am God's eternal love pouring forth. This is the ultimate oneness with our cosmic beloved, allowing the divine to work through us fully and completely without attachments or desires or thoughts or cares or worries or fears. So next time you find yourself stuck, stressed out, thinking about the past, regret, shame, guilt, oh, did I commit a sin? Those are all traps of the thinking mind in the illusion. We have to give up thought. We have to work on purifying the vessel, removing aggravators externally and internally, so we can calm the mind enough to start dissolving the ego continually to get to the center of the circle and become the observer. We have to reconstitute and empty the mind. It's so important, my friends. The reason I always talk about this, emptying the mind, so much is because based off of my own experience and what it has done for my understanding. Allowing, it deepens and opens our communication with the divine. We have to allow space for this communication. And if we're constantly stimulating, aggravating, and taking in information, filling the mind and over agitating and stimulating the mind, it's hard to listen to hear what God's saying, right? This is a realization I naturally came to. See, this is what's crazy is all we have to do is presence and purification. This is why you're going to hear me say presence and purification. How many times have you heard me say that? If you've been watching my videos or you're new, just in this video, about 1,000 times. That's all we have to focus on. That's it. And everything else will align naturally. The divine will lead you exactly where you need to go. I started with meditation. There's my presence. And purification. I was led to Dr. Morris in regenerative detoxification, purifying the body. Presence and purification has led me to things like Kriya Yoga, like cleansing the chakras through Om Japa, things like this, and relaxing and cleaning the body and the mind. It's led me to naturally, without any knowledge of it or how it works, through presence and purification and focusing on remaining present and constantly purifying the body, I was led to reconstituting and empty the mind. The divine is going to lead you where you got to go. All you got to do is presence and purification, baby. And without realizing it, I was emptying my mind. I stopped taking information. I just couldn't, my body and mind naturally said, no more, enough. Stop taking information. I didn't want to hear it. You want to listen to a podcast? Not me. I'm done. I've listened to plenty. Not that I haven't listened. I've listened to endless stuff. And it's all just voices ringing, blah, blah, blah. But is it what you need? I don't know. You don't need to search for answers. You don't need to search for... Remember, God's just waiting for you to give it all up, including your search for answers. You don't got to search. You don't got to do anything. Just give it all up. Surrender. And God and the divine will give you everything you need. Will guide you where you need to go. Will give you the inspiration and guidance you need, right? I've gained incredible, insurmountable, deeper understanding of a lot of these subjects I speak of through giving it all up and through reconstituting and emptying the mind and allowing space for the divine to communicate with me. I can't tell you how important it is, my friends. I never would have understood any of this stuff if I was still cramming information, not listening to stuff nonstop and just not giving myself a break. You got to give it all up, my friends, and you will get it. You will start to get these understandings, which will help you progress even more. I never imagined 1,000 years, 5-10 years ago, if you told me you're going to be a spiritual teacher because you were going to be gaining these deeper understandings, I would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. Get away from me. You know what I mean? I didn't see, this is the thing. I didn't seek this path of teaching and of being a vessel for the divine. This naturally was shown to me. Talk about finding your life's purpose. This was given to me by just giving it all, devoting my life to God, to our cosmic beloved, presence and purification. That's all God's waiting for us to do. Take our attention off all the garbage, give our attention to God, purify these vessels of God. That's all. That's all we got to do, my friends. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about anything I talk about, or any of my concepts, or control, or the illusion, the circle, I have many videos about all these things. I have many videos about control, many videos about the circle, many videos about presence and purification. So please check out my catalog if you're interested in seeing more on my YouTube and TikTok. And then I also my Facebook. I share much about my purification journey as well, and the types of things I eat to cleanse and purify and detoxify the body, because this is vital to the journey, my friends. I can't say how vital it is, because the wrong diet can throw us way out of balance, and it can make us easier to control. It can aggravate us. It can make it very difficult to balance and calm the mind. So that's why I harp about it so much. Thank you, my friends. May the cosmic beloved bless us all with peace, with presence, with patience, with understanding, and with eternal love. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. Namaste.